Hey YouTube, Kevin here. Hope everyone's well. It's pretty pleasant down here in Australia today. Uh, we're well into spring here, and yeah, summer's around the corner. It's kind of overcast today and a little bit humid, but it's a pretty pleasant day. So today I'm going to do something a little different with a friend of mine in New England in the States. His name is Rick, and his YouTube handle is Mr. Concert. I did mention him in a video or two before. He sent me the Gentleman Caller that I reviewed. So I'm going to hand it over to him. He's over there in New England with a couple of tobacco tins there on show, and his 7LE pipe, and he will give you a rundown on what we're doing today, and it's going to be like a comparison of the same tobacco with a bit of age on it. And I'm going to let Rick do most of the talking because he's much more eloquent than I am when it comes to talking. And so, buddy, I'll hand it over to you, and you can kick us off. Thanks, mate.
All right. Well, thanks, Kevin. So, welcome back. And today we're going to be doing a bit of a review on comparing a new Orlik Golden Slice to an older Golden Slice. A little bit windy here today, so occasionally might hear some gusts of wind or whatever. If that happens, I'll just stop for a moment and let it go by. It's fall in New England, and it gets pretty gusty here sometimes. Kind of chilly today, in the low 50s Fahrenheit, which I don't know what that turns out to in translation to Celsius. So whenever, it's cool. It's a little bit chilly today. So the story of all of this was the square-tinned Golden Slice. I have a local tobacconist that sometimes takes a while before they sell everything that's on the shelf. This particular one I bought in the summer of 2017 from them, and had been on the shelf for probably, I'm guessing, at least 2 or 3 years. So I don't know exactly how old it is exactly. There's a series of numbers on it in terms of the normal Scandinavian tobacco kind of code with all these things. I'm sure somebody could figure out what the date is, but the point was we had some of this older stuff, and I didn't even realize it was old when I first bought it. I just thought they came in the square tins, and if you look at my review from a year or so ago, I didn't even realize that was the case. They've switched over to the round ones now, so fair enough. So I sent a few of the flakes to Kevin, and this was his idea, which I think was a good one. You know, the idea of why don't we compare the two, and what does it seem to do when you age them for a few years. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my thoughts. I'll hand it back to Kevin to do his, and then we'll kind of wrap it up a little bit, each of us. And welcome to our first attempt at doing, an international two-party pipe review. I don't know. It seems like this will be a fun thing. I think this will be fun. Hopefully you'll like it as much as we are. We're having a good time behind the scenes kind of talking about it. Today, smoking a 7LE 207, a little bit of a pear shape here. I don't know if you can see it. Fantastic grain on this. I love this pipe. Feels really great in the hand. And so, as I stated, the original Golden Slice, I got it at the time of when I'm taping this, probably a year and a half or so ago. And it had to have sat on the shelf for at least a few years. So I'm thinking it's probably 3 or 4 years old or so. And then I went ahead and bought a fresh one from, good grief, smokingpipes.com, because I wanted one as new as possible. And an interesting twist once I got this a little bit, before I get into what I came up with my own sort of recollection. I smoked the two of them side by side a couple of times and have done a little bit with this. Basically, you know, coming off of doing cigars, if you let cigars sit for a year or so, oftentimes they really takes a bit of the edge off. They get a little smoother. Sometimes the flavor gets a little deeper on them. Mostly it just kind of smooths things out. And for an awful lot of people, that's really kind of a cool gig. They like to have their cigars sit for a little bit. So we were wondering, well, what would happen with this? So what I found with the new one, I'll put my glasses on because the writing on the new one is even smaller. I'll give you the traditional description on the back of this. This is from the older one. This blend is composed of golden Virginia tobaccos with a touch of Perique. A fine natural sweetness in both taste and aroma characterize Orlik Golden Slice. This cut is a traditional navy cut flake, i.e. pressed tobacco, and cut into thin slices. Kind of the standard thing. And with this, as probably everybody has said when they've done reviews, I don't really smell much of a topping at all. It seems rather much like an English blend. When you know, I give you a brief impression of it, but there's a whole bunch of reviews out there. Essentially, this stuff really smells like the Virginias, that hay, sweetness smell. The ongoing constant debate over whether or not there was any Perique in it, because the flakes never looked very dark. This is one of the newer ones, but you'll get the same idea with this. You know, it's a typical flake. It's a little bit thick, and it has all these striations of different colored tobaccos that are in there. Hopefully that's focusing. But it mostly looks like medium to darker brown Virginias. Occasionally a few little streaks here and there that seem to be a lighter color, probably some brighter Virginias. Mostly what you smell on a tin note on both of these seems to be very similar to me. That was one of those things I half anticipated, that there was going to be a real difference between the newer and the older in terms of the tin note. And I didn't especially appreciate much of a difference. There's still that grassy sweetness that is the prominent note that you get in a tin note. Very characteristic for Orlik Golden Slice. And it smells wonderful. It smells really clean. I think on my review I said it smells a lot like a hay barn. And that's about what it smells like to me. Very cool stuff. I was also wondering, between the two, was I going to see a difference in color? Perhaps I was wondering if the older stuff might have darkened up a little bit. And I won't try and put the two side by side because I really don't appreciate a lot of difference in the coloring particularly, which is okay. Makes me wonder if the tobacco they use for Scandinavian Tobacco Group is the one that puts these together. Wondering if maybe that's a little bit aged already. There should be some marrying of the flavors once you get them sitting all together, pressed together, and sitting in a tin for a while. But I didn't really notice a lot in terms of was it fermenting, was it sort of getting to a deeper color as far as looking at the flakes in and of themselves. Now, let me read you the tin description of the new one, because I think this is kind of interesting. The new one says, a mixture, Orlik Golden Sliced, a mixture of golden, mature Virginia tobaccos from the traditional tobacco districts in eastern USA. The tobacco is pressed into cakes and matures during storage before it is processed into cut cakes. This blend has the natural sweet flavor and freshness of the finest Virginia tobaccos. Aroma, semicolon, fresh citrus and orange note, and the cut is a flake. Now, just as an aside, I've read on some of the review sites, people have talked a little bit about the citrus notes, and I guess maybe my palate is not sophisticated enough because I don't really appreciate a citrus note, particularly for me. I would say there's more like a honey sweetness, perhaps an ever so slight topping of vanilla, but I don't smell much of anything in terms of a citrus note. I just don't particularly appreciate that. But with the new, they don't mention anything about the long-fabled perique that everybody used to kind of go, is there perique? Is there not in the older cuts? So did they change the blend? I don't know. I don't see anything, in looking a little bit online, I didn't see anything that specifically said, oh yes, this is now a different blend or formulation, but they don't mention the perique anymore. So kind of an interesting thing. So I'm smoking one of the new ones here. And so in a nutshell, maybe not quite such a nutshell, tend to go on a little bit. What do I think is the difference? Well, I gotta say, I think there probably is a little bit of maturing or maturation with the tobacco before you get it, because the historical perspective, I think, from everyone and a general consensus is that Orlik Golden Slice is really pretty mild and mellow, and this is certainly an easy, approachable mix. That's why so many people love it, because it's flavorful, it's yummy, the Virginias are great. That room note is just such a pleasant light from those Virginias. The sweetness comes through. It's everything the Golden Slice is, and that's why it's such a popular blend. Do I notice a great difference with the new stuff? I don't so much. I would say that, and at first I was thinking, okay, am I going into this thinking it has to be there? It has to be that it's different. Was I going to notice with the new stuff a bit of an edge or a harshness, maybe not quite so smooth or whatever? I didn't, especially. And having said that, I've never particularly noticed a harshness with Golden Sliced, which, because it is what it is. But I think, I'm hoping I'm not getting psychosomatic, but I think I sense a little bit of a richness, a little bit of a smoother flavor to the older versus the newer. A little bit of depth of the flavor, maybe a little bit more. The grassiness is still there. That hasn't gone away with the older stuff. It's still, when you open up the tin note, it smells like the fresh cut grass. You still get that Virginia as the primary note, but it seems like it's maybe mellowed a little bit. It did seem like the hay smell, scent, that grassy, it is a little more potent in the newer than the older. But in terms of the overall flavor, probably if I switched one to the other, and maybe it's because I don't smoke Golden Slice that often, I tend to have drifted a little bit more towards aromatics lately. But this is if I'm going to have an English type blend, and that's sort of what I view this as, even though there's supposedly like a vapor because there's Perique and Virginias in here. I never thought there was a lot of Perique. I never got that spiciness. It's always been just a really smooth, mellow, enjoyable blend. You can see why so many people really love it. And that sort of honey, see, that's what I think I'm smelling at least. That sort of honeyish sweet smell translates into room note. And you pick it up a bit on the tin note. The grassiness, like most Virginias when you actually smoke them, that subsides. You don't really smell that so much. The experience is just a nice, full-bodied flavor. Well, I say full-bodied. It's not a particularly strong one, but it has a very nice flavor to it. I hadn't done Golden Slice in a while, and so going through this process and smoking it a bit more, it's kind of one of those things you kind of stumble across something you like and you've done in the past and you go, gosh, I really like this. I don't know why I haven't done this more lately. But I'd say a little bit more depth, a little bit more of a richness, and yet a little bit of a smoothness on top, though it was never harsh, if that makes any sense. Overall, as an experiment, I think there is a subtle difference, but it's not as much as I expected. Maybe again, I'm not as familiar with the blend because I don't smoke it as regularly. But over the last week or so, I gotta say, I think there's a little bit of a difference, but not a huge amount. But I like what it did. And so overall, I'm enjoying it. I still enjoy the new stuff, but I gotta say, after having probably this has been sitting for at least a few years, I don't know exactly. I gotta say, I kind of dig it. Not bad at all. It's kind of a nice touch. So if you had some and you were going to sell it, I think it probably does make a little bit of a difference to it. It does seem to give it a little bit of that depth and smoothness. So that's kind of my take on it for right now. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, and you're up, brother. And then I'll come back and give a kind of quick recap and final words on everything, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, mate. That was really good. See, I told you it was much more eloquent than me. So what I'm smoking here is some of the flake out of that square tin that Rick had in front of him there. When I first got it and opened the zippy bag, I got that fruity smell, like a dried fruity smell and citrus smell. When I first lit it, I got that dried fruit taste. People's tastes are quite different, even between Rick and I. Just finding this flake quite smooth. I was smoking it in my Grabo Prince, and I originally, the first time I tried Orlik was probably 4 years ago, I guess, and I originally got it in this 100-gram tin, and it's quite different physically to that 50-gram tin that Rick has. Is those little tight little flakes, whereas this seems to come in a big, long, not so tightly packed flake. And I actually thought I'd use it all out of that 100-gram tin. I took it to a meet-up and gave a lot away, but I actually discovered that at the back of my cellar, and as you can see, that's how it comes out of the tin, that 100-gram tin. It's quite messy as opposed to those little flakes. I remember when I first smoked that, when I first opened that tin, the first thing that hit me was that citrus smell. And that originally was a little, quite tangy. Not bitey, but tangy. And it's interesting too that Rick mentioned in that old square tin about the perique. I can actually, one of the few things I can definitely pick out generally in tobacco is perique. I get that tongue tingle and I can feel it on my lips, and I can definitely feel it on my tongue. It's like a fizz I get. Rick said he couldn't pick it, and I've heard other people say they can't pick it, so I guess, it's just a matter of what you can and can't taste. I don't know, but I'm definitely picking something out of it that tastes a lot like perique. It's a great tobacco. I mean, for the price you pay for it. I think in Europe it's an over-the-counter blend, and they get it in pouches as opposed to the tins in America. But it is a great tobacco. So I'm not going to say too much more. what I'm going to do now is go back to Rick. He's just going to wrap up his thoughts on it, and you know, his thoughts on cellaring it, and then I'll just finish it off. And yeah, so back over to you, buddy. You can wrap this up. Thanks, mate.
All right. Well, so welcome back. So kind of wrapping it up, my final take on all of this is, it does seem to have made a bit of a difference. Not earth-shattering, not change the world's or the Earth's axis difference, at least not in my experience, and perhaps with more time, that would change more. Maybe it would be a process that would continue if I had an unopened tin and let it sit for even longer. But I gotta say, I like Golden Slice anyways, and it's not a particularly harsh, as we talked about, harsh tobacco at all in any manner. So, you know, smoothing out, lightening up a little bit on it probably isn't going to go an awful lot because it isn't very, you know, it isn't all that strong to begin with. But I think it has. I think having sat for a few years gave a little bit of depth of flavor, a little bit of mellowness, smoothed it out a touch. It certainly seems to have taken a little bit of the edge off of the tin note for the grassiness that comes from the Virginias. But I don't know if that matters all that much, because a lot of times that doesn't translate, at least to me, quite so much with the room note or the taste as the smoker. But overall, a little bit deeper, richer flavor, a little smoother and mellow. Actually, kind of a nice experiment. This was Kevin's idea to try these two, and I gotta say, actually, this is kind of a cool idea. I hadn't thought of it. So, hats off, brother. And if you were someone who had some Golden Slice and wanted to tin it up and let it sit for a while, it does seem to make a little bit of a difference. And I guess Virginias are known for their improving sometimes with a little bit of cellaring. But I would also say that I don't know that it makes a huge difference. And I wonder if perhaps they sort of allude to it on the tin note. Perhaps the Virginias have been aged a little bit already before they put them together and make the blend. But overall, Orlik Golden Slice still continues to be something that I would recommend, and the letting it sit for a little bit does seem to kind of help. It's kind of a neat thing. It gives it a little bit of extra on it that is pretty cool and very good. So I would recommend doing it. I'm going to hand it back to Kevin, and thanks so much for watching. And hopefully, let us know what you think of the two-person review and across the continents. Maybe it doesn't make that much difference, but it seems kind of fun on our end. So thanks again for watching, and I'll hand you back over to Kevin.
Thanks, Rick. That's great, mate. Yeah, I agree with him. You can cellar it up. It's a good idea. I intend to get as much of it as I can while the going is good. I think you all have heard from us down here that it's not easy to get tobacco down here into Oz, and so I'll be getting it while I can. So with that, I'll say goodbye. Thanks very much for watching if you've made it right to the end, and thanks, Rick. If, as you said, let us know what you think of the idea, if you think it stinks, or if you enjoyed it. Either way, yeah, it's fun to do. We had a lot of fun setting it up and working out what we wanted to do in it. We might try and do another one, and yeah, we'll see how we go. So thanks again for watching. Thanks, Rick. And I'll say goodbye. Ciao.